Imagine you are in the middle of the worst day of your life. Not the dramatic kind of worst day. Not the kind that arrives with sirens and clear villains and a story that makes sense when you tell it afterward. The quiet kind. The kind where you have made a series of small, reasonable, increasingly desperate decisions that have somehow resulted in you standing in a bank with a toy gun, attempting a robbery, failing at the robbery, fleeing into the nearest open door, and finding yourself trapped in an apartment full of strangers who were trying to buy a home. You did not plan this. You are not a criminal. You are a person who needed money and ran out of options and made a choice that was terrible and human and completely understandable given everything that came before it. And now you are here, in this apartment, with these people. And the police are outside, and there is no version of what happens next that looks like the version of your life you intended to be living. And the strangers in the apartment are not what you expected either. There is a retired couple who have been arguing for 40 years and are still, somehow, here. There are two women who have been together long enough to know everything about each other and are terrified, in the specific way of people who have everything to lose, of what the next few hours might cost them. There is a real estate agent who is very bad at her job but very committed to continuing to do it. There is an old man whose silence contains something enormous. There is a rabbit. And there is you, a person who needed money and found, instead, all of this. Fredrik Backman is asking, through the comedy and the chaos and the hostage negotiation that is somehow both farcical and devastating simultaneously, whether the worst moments of our lives might be the moments when we finally, accidentally, find the people who understand us. Whether crisis is sometimes the only condition under which humans allow themselves to be honest with each other. Whether a failed bank robbery can be, in the hands of the right writer, a love letter to the whole exhausting, bewildering project of being a person. This is Anxious People, and it will make you laugh, and then it will make you cry, and then it will make you laugh again while you are still crying, and you will not be entirely sure how that happened or what to do about it. Who was Fredrik Backman when he wrote this book? Fredrik Backman is a Swedish writer who came to fiction sideways, from a career in journalism and blogging, and who arrived on the international literary stage with A Man Called Ove, a novel about a grumpy, grief-stricken old man and his reluctant return to the world of the living. That became one of the most beloved books of the last decade and proved, definitively, that there was an enormous global audience for fiction that was warm and sad and funny in equal measure, and completely unashamed of caring about its characters. He writes about ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, or, more precisely, about ordinary people whose circumstances are not extraordinary at all, who are simply living the ordinary life of pain and love and loss and connection and stubbornness that constitutes a human existence, and who are revealed, under his attention, to be extraordinary by virtue of being themselves so completely. He writes with a specific voice that is immediately recognizable and very difficult to describe. It is dry. It is warm. It holds irony and tenderness simultaneously without letting either cancel the other. It makes observations about human behavior that feel simultaneously surprising and completely obvious, as if he has said the thing you have always known but never found the words for. He is funny in a way that accumulates rather than performing. The humor builds from the truth of the characters rather than from jokes imposed on top of them. Anxious People, published in Sweden in 2019 and an English translation in 2020, is his most structurally ambitious novel. It is also, in many ways, his most honest about the specific subject that runs underneath all his work, the way human beings manage, despite everything, to need each other. The way connection arrives sideways and at the worst possible moments. The way the people who end up mattering most to us are often the people we would never have chosen if we had been given the choice calmly in advance. He wrote it, he has said, as an attempt to say something about anxiety and isolation and the way the world can feel like too much, and about what happens when a group of people who are each carrying too much are forced, by circumstances beyond any of their control, to be in the same room together. Let us enter the world of the book. The structure announces itself immediately as unusual. We are in a police interview room. A father and son, both police officers, are questioning witnesses to a hostage situation that ended with the hostage taker vanishing from a locked apartment in front of multiple witnesses. The case makes no sense. The witnesses are unhelpful in ways that feel deliberate. The story they are telling is full of gaps that seem to be protecting something. And then the novel steps back to the day before, to the apartment viewing, to the people who gathered in a Stockholm apartment on New Year's Eve to look at a property that none of them, for their own reasons, were certain they wanted or could afford. There is Roger and Anna-Lena, retired, devoted, at war with each other about everything in the specific way of people who have been at war with each other for long enough that the war has become the relationship. They have a system for apartment viewings. The system involves sabotage. The system exists because Anna-Lena is bored, and Roger does not know how to tell her that he is frightened of what will happen when they no longer have a project to pursue together. There is Julia and Ro, two women whose relationship is tested by the specific pressure of wanting a home, and not quite being able to afford one, and having different ideas about what home means, and what they are doing and where they are going. Julia is sharp and anxious. Ro is patient and afraid. They love each other with the frustrated devotion of two people who are each trying to protect the other from something the other person can see perfectly well. There is Estelle, an older woman who is attending the viewing for reasons that gradually become the emotional center of the entire novel. She is quiet and observant and carries something with her that the other characters do not initially notice, and that the reader slowly assembles from the details Bachman offers, piece by piece, until the full picture arrives. And the full picture is the thing that makes the book impossible to reduce to its comedy. There is the real estate agent Zara, who is not good at her job but is present and doing it anyway, which Bachman treats as a form of courage. She is brittle and professional and defended in ways that her profession makes convenient and that her history has made necessary. She has a connection to the rest of the story that she does not yet know about. The connection is the book's secret until the moment it is not. And there is Jack, the younger of the two police officers, trying to make sense of a case that does not make sense, carrying his own grief in the specific compressed way of someone who has decided that professionalism is the only container currently available. And into this collection of people walks the bank robber, who needed money, whose need had a reason, whose reason has been waiting in the back of the novel to be revealed. Now we go to the heart of it. The central question of anxious people is one that Bachman asks from every angle simultaneously without ever stating it directly. What would happen if, just for a few hours, the performances we maintain for the world were no longer possible? Each person in that apartment is performing, not dishonestly, performatively maintaining the version of themselves that is legible to the world, the face they have decided to show, the identity built around whatever it is they have decided they can and cannot afford to let people know about them. Roger is performing certainty. Anna-Lena is performing competence. Julia is performing control. Zara is performing the absence of feeling. Jack is performing the absence of grief. And the hostage situation strips the performances away, not all at once. Not cleanly, but the hours in the apartment, the proximity, the shared fear, the specific alchemy of people who are stuck together with no social exit, all of it creates conditions under which the performances become unsustainable. And what is underneath them, when they finally give way, is the thing the book has been building toward. What is underneath is not more darkness. The darkness is real, but it is not what the book is about. What is underneath the performances is the need. The ordinary, embarrassing, completely human need to be known, to be seen by someone other than yourself, to be in a room with another person and have them understand, without too much explanation, what it is like to be you. The hostage situation is the mechanism. The mechanism is absurd. But the thing the mechanism creates, the involuntary intimacy of people who have been stripped of their ability to manage the impression they make, is not absurd at all. It is the condition that Bachman is arguing most of us are starving for and spending enormous amounts of energy arranging not to experience. He writes, in one of the novel's most precisely aimed passages, that people find it so hard to talk about the things that matter most to them, because talking about them makes them real and real things can be lost, And the only protection against that loss is not naming the things you love too clearly where the world can hear you. And then he writes that this protection has a cost, that the things you do not name can also not be shared, and that a life lived entirely inside the protection of not naming things is a life spent mostly alone. Let us talk about what this book is really saying. The first great theme is the universality of anxiety. The title is not metaphorical. Bachman is making a claim about the human condition, that anxiety is not a pathology that afflicts some people and not others, but a fundamental feature of consciousness. That to be a person who is aware of the world and of other people and of the future is to be, to some degree, anxious. That the people in that apartment, each carrying their private version of too much, are not exceptional cases. They are people. And people are anxious. This is a compassionate argument and a democratizing one. It removes the shame from the experience by insisting on its universality. When Bachman shows us Roger's fear and Annalena's boredom that is actually fear, and Julia's sharpness that is actually fear, and Zara's professionalism that is actually fear, and Jack's grief that is inseparable from fear, he is not pathologizing these characters. He is recognizing them. He is saying, of course you are afraid. Of course you have built systems to manage it. Of course the systems are imperfect. You are a person. This is what persons do. The second great theme is the accidental community. None of the people in that apartment chose each other. None of them would have, given the option. They are random, collected by the coincidence of a property viewing on a specific afternoon, held together by a situation nobody planned. And yet by the end of the novel, Bachman has made a genuine case that what formed in that apartment is something real. Not a community in the organized, intentional sense, but in the older, more honest sense. A group of people who have seen each other in an unguarded moment and cannot entirely unknow what they saw. This is an argument about how connection actually happens, as opposed to how we imagine it happens. We imagine it is chosen, that we select our people deliberately, build our communities consciously, surround ourselves with the right people by exercising the right judgment. But most of the deepest connections of our lives arrived sideways. Were forced on us by circumstance. Were formed not in the moments of our choosing, but in the moments when we had no choice and had to be present with whoever was there. The apartment full of strangers is Bachman's image for this. The hostage situation is the crisis that strips away choice and leaves only presence. And presence, it turns out, is enough. The third great theme is the bridge and what it represents. There is a bridge in this book. It appears early and it appears late, and it connects the stories in ways that the novel reveals slowly, with the patience of a writer who knows exactly what he is building and trusts the reader to wait for it. The bridge is the place where people go when they have run out of road. And it is also, in Bachman's hands, the place where the most important human encounters in the novel occur. What happens on the bridge, what the bridge represents in terms of what one person can do for another person at the worst possible moment, is the book's emotional axis. Everything rotates around it. And when its full significance becomes clear in the final sections of the novel, the comedy that has been the book's surface tone does not disappear. It transforms. It becomes the comedy of people who survived, who are still here, who found each other by accident in the worst moments, and discovered that accidents, sometimes, are the only way the most important things happen. Now let us look at these characters as the people they truly are. Roger and Annalena are the book's great comic engine and its most quietly devastating portrait of a long marriage. They bicker. They misunderstand each other. They communicate in the elaborate, inefficient code of two people who have been together so long that they have stopped checking whether the other person is receiving the message they intended to send. And underneath all of it is something so simple and so enormous that neither of them can say it directly. They are terrified of losing each other, and they have no idea how to exist in the same room with that terror, so they have turned it into a system of apartment viewings and managed disagreements that keeps them close without requiring them to say why closeness matters. When they finally, briefly, say the true thing, it is one of the funniest and most painful moments in a book full of funny and painful moments. Because the true thing is not eloquent. It is not the speech from a film. It is two old people talking to each other in their normal language, which is also the language of people who have been too close for too long to be entirely kind, saying something that is real. Zara is the character who carries the book's most serious emotional weight and carries it entirely in the subtext until the moment she does not. She is constructed as brittle and professional and slightly contemptible in the early sections, the kind of character whose function appears to be comic and whose depth reveals itself gradually. When her depth reveals itself fully, it is not a twist. It is a clarification. Everything she has been becomes comprehensible in a way that reframes her entirely. She is not brittle because she is cold. She is brittle because she is carrying something that would break most people, and she is carrying it alone because she has decided, for reasons the book reveals with tremendous care, that she does not deserve to put it down. Jack is the novel's access point into grief. He is young and competent and professional, and in the middle of something that has not yet finished happening to him. His relationship with his father, the older police officer, Jim, is the book's portrait of the specific silence that forms between men who love each other and have no available language for it. They talk about the case. They talk around the thing that is actually between them. And the circling of the thing, the elaborate avoidance of the direct conversation, is both funny and a genuine portrayal of how many important things go unsaid between people who are not equipped to say them. Estelle is the novel's secret. Describing her fully would be to take from the reader the experience of discovering her, which is one of the great gifts the book offers. What can be said is that she is quiet, and that her quietness is not absence, and that what she carries, and what she gives, and what the novel reveals about her connection to the rest of the story, is the thing that makes Anxious People more than a comic novel about a failed bank robbery. She is the reason the book earns everything it asks of you. And the bank robber, the person at the center of the chaos, whose identity the novel withholds and withholds again with the structural precision of a writer who knows that the mystery is not the point, and the point is not the mystery, but the person, the specific, ordinary, frightened, completely comprehensible person, who walked into a bank with a toy gun because they had run out of every other option. When we understand the bank robber fully, we understand why the novel is called Anxious People and not Anxious Person. Because the bank robber is not an exception. The bank robber is all of them, is all of us. What has this book done in the world? Anxious People was published in Sweden in 2019 and arrived in English translation in 2020, in the specific context of a world that was learning, collectively and individually, what it meant to be isolated. The timing, again like the Midnight Library, was not calculated but was perfect. A book about strangers forced into involuntary proximity, about the accidental communities that form in crisis, about anxiety as the universal condition of being awake and alive and aware. It arrived into a world that was living all of those things in real time. It became an international bestseller, following the trajectory established by a man called Ove and Bachman's other novels. It was adapted into a Netflix series in 2021, which introduced it to an audience that responded to its specific mixture of comedy and devastation, with the kind of affection that television rarely generates. The adaptation was praised for honoring the emotional tone of the novel, the way it holds lightness and seriousness together without allowing either to diminish the other. The conversation around the book was notably different from the conversation around most best-selling fiction. Readers did not primarily discuss the plot. They discussed the feeling. The specific feeling of being recognized, of reading a book and finding in it an accurate description of the interior experience that most people manage most of the time without being able to name it. The experience of anxiety not as clinical condition, but as weather. The experience of needing people and not knowing how to let them know. Mental health professionals noted, as they did with Haig's work, the potential of the book as a vehicle for conversations that are otherwise difficult to have. Bachman's comedy makes the material accessible in ways that direct discussion sometimes does not. The laughter creates an opening, and in that opening, something real can be said. Now let me be honest with you. Anxious People is a book that requires trust. The early sections are deliberately disorienting. The structure is fractured. The timeline is nonlinear. The comedy is broad in ways that might make a reader uncertain whether the book intends to be taken seriously. It does, but it earns that trust through accumulation rather than announcement. You have to stay with it through the confusion to reach the clarity. The comedy is genuine, and it is good comedy. Bachman has real wit and uses it with control, but it is in service of the seriousness rather than in competition with it. Readers who want pure comedy will find the emotional weight an interruption. Readers who want pure seriousness will find the comedy a relief. The book is insisting on both simultaneously, and if you can let it have both, the combination produces something that neither mode could achieve alone. The structure, the police interviews intercut with the apartment scenes, the gradual revelation of identities and connections, rewards attention and patience. Some of the connections arrive late, and arriving late they reframe things that came earlier in ways that require the reader to reassemble their understanding of what they have read. This is satisfying rather than frustrating, but it requires the willingness to be uncertain for longer than most popular fiction asks. The Translation, by Neil Smith, is one of the great achievements of the novel's English existence. Bachman's voice, that specific mixture of dry and warm, of irony worn lightly, of observations that land with the force of truth dressed as casualness, survives the translation in ways that are not automatic, and that Smith has clearly worked hard to preserve. Who should read this book? Anyone who has ever felt like they were failing at something everyone else seemed to be managing without difficulty. Anyone who has ever been in a room full of people and felt completely alone. Anyone who has ever loved someone in the inefficient, inarticulate, thoroughly imperfect way that most actual love looks like when it is not being performed. Anyone who needs to be reminded that the people around them are also carrying things, also afraid, also doing their best with what they have. Read it if you are anxious and want to feel less alone in that. Read it if you love someone anxious and want to understand what it is like from the inside. Read it if you need a book that will make you laugh so that you will be off your guard when it makes you cry. Read it if you have been in a crisis, your own or someone else's, and found that the crisis produced a connection that the ordinary days never had. We reach the end. Fredrik Backman wrote Anxious People as a love letter to the failed bank robbery that is the human condition, to the toy guns we carry when we have run out of options, to the apartments we stumble into when the plan falls apart, to the strangers who are there when we arrive and who are, somehow, exactly what we needed to find. He wrote it as a case for the proposition that the worst moments contain the best possibilities, not because suffering is ennobling, or because crisis is necessary, or because the stories we tell about hard times always need to resolve into lessons, but because the worst moments are the moments when we stop performing, when the version of ourselves we have been maintaining for the world's benefit becomes too expensive to sustain, when we are simply, without preparation, exactly who we are. And exactly who we are, frightened and stubborn and loving and failing and trying again, and carrying more than anyone can see, is sufficient. Is, in fact, the whole thing. The people in that apartment were anxious. They were all anxious. They were anxious in the ordinary, unremarkable, completely universal way of people who are paying attention to their lives, and to the lives of the people they love, and to the precariousness of both. And they were, in the hours they spent together in that apartment they did not choose, briefly and imperfectly and genuinely connected. Not fixed, not healed, not resolved, connected. Which is, Bachman is arguing, with the gentleness of someone who has thought about this very carefully and is not being sentimental when he says it. The only thing that ever actually helps. The door to the apartment opens. The hostage situation ends. The people go back to their lives, the same lives, with all the same fears and the same losses and the same ordinary days that contain both too much and not enough. But something happened in there, something small and real and impossible to fully explain to someone who was not in the room. The kind of thing that almost did not happen. The kind of thing that almost never does. The kind of thing Bachman wants you to understand that is worth everything it costs to get here. Including the toy gun. Including the failed robbery. Including the whole terrifying, bewildering, occasionally hilarious, Always too much and not quite enough experience of being a person who needs other people and does not always know how to say so. You are not alone in that. You were never alone in that. The library is full of people just like you, standing in the anxiety of their own lives, waiting for someone to walk through the door.